This happened in 2016 when I was a 17-year-old first-year college student in film school. I'm now a 22-year-old female. My name is Julia. I lived alone in my first ever apartment. It was really small, but I was really proud of my independence. I never felt unsafe in this apartment for several reasons. There were multiple gates in the residence that needed to be opened through a code only the people who lived there knew. My door had 3 different locks, and it was right next to the university, so most people who lived in the neighborhood were college students. Nothing bad had ever happened in the neighborhood before. I've always been very careful with locking the door when I leave my home. I always check twice. I have slight OCD. So this one time, I leave to go to class and lock my door, but for some reason I couldn't get the key out of the lock. It was completely stuck, so I went to get the caretaker of the building to help me, but he wasn't there and I was getting late for class, so I went to class with the key still in the lock. I took off the keychain first so it's not too noticeable. When I got home, the caretaker was back, so he came to help me, and we couldn't get it out for 15 minutes until somehow he did. He told me the lock was damaged, but that I didn't necessarily need to change it if only I locked it once instead of twice. I just said okay, and that was the end of it. I really wasn't worried because of how safe I felt in this building. Fast forward to 2 months later. I was taking out the trash one night around 11 p.m. while on the phone with my sister. I remember telling her that I was taking out the trash, then that I would take a shower afterwards before heading to a party. As I previously said, I always lock the door, even just to take out the trash. Because of my lock being damaged, I only locked it once. When I got back to my apartment, I found the door unlocked, which immediately alarmed me. So I went into the apartment and locked the door immediately, with 3 different types of locks. When you walk into my apartment, which is just 215 square feet, you have the main room in front of you, and the bathroom door immediately to your left. I had left the bathroom door slightly open, enough so I could see a man in my shower, turning his back to me. Naturally, when I saw this, I tried to open the door and leave as fast as possible, except my main lock was damaged from 2 months earlier, and I couldn't open it no matter how hard I tried. In this moment, all I could think of was the fact that I had to leave as fast as possible. I jumped out the window without really thinking. I figured it was the only solution, except I lived on the 2nd floor, so I completely smashed my ankles in the landing. I started running in whichever way I could, and when I got a little bit further from the building, I looked back and a man was there, at my window, watching me run away. I thought of 2 possible outcomes. Either the man was going to jump and chase me, except I wouldn't get far with my twisted ankles, or he would get scared of the height and be locked in my apartment. Thankfully, he picked option 2. I went to hide in a bush a little further and called the police, who arrived in just 10 minutes because I lived close to the station. They pushed my door open and the man was just there sitting on my couch, holding a kitchen knife, waiting for me to come back. Like he didn't think I would call the police. They arrested the guy and later told me he had already been arrested for sexual assault, rape, attempted kidnapping, and attempted murder. They also told me how everything had happened. Like I said, it was a very friendly neighborhood, with mostly college students. So he got inside the building by other people holding the door open for him. He then heard me telling my sister I was going to take a shower, which was why he was waiting in the bathroom for me. He crocheted my lock while I was taking out the trash. He apparently noticed me on school campus and followed me to my home several times before succeeding to actually come in. He stayed inside waiting for me because I had recently changed my phone and the previous one was still on the table, so he thought I didn't have a phone with me to call the police. I don't live there anymore, but after that, to get into the building, we all needed identification proving we lived there. Building IDs were created, and we had to scan them every time, and it was the only way to go inside the building. Nothing bad happened in the neighborhood after that. It's back to being very peaceful and friendly.
I apologize in advance since I'm not a good writer, but I'll do my best to share my experience. To better paint the picture, here's a description of myself at the time of this incident 3 years ago. 5'5", 26-year-old woman, medium-length bleach blonde hair, curvy, 175 pounds, wearing black high-waisted tights and a pink crop top. 3 years ago, I was walking home late at night from my friend's house. It was dark, and at the time, I lived in a rough part of a large city. I've had many sketchy situations that I've gotten myself out of, so I guess I felt sort of invincible, like nothing truly scary could happen to me. When I walk alone, I always stay very alert and aware of my surroundings, for my own safety, just in case. About halfway home and roughly 10 minutes to my apartment, I notice a van start tailing me. I was used to this since, in my city, it's very common for young women in a rough area to get propositioned for sex. It's embarrassing how desensitized to this I was. I did my usual and crossed the road so that I would be walking beside the traffic, heading in the other direction. I wasn't scared, just annoyed. The van then turned down a side street, then back onto the road I was on, and pulled up to me. At this point, I still wasn't scared. Again, this has happened so many times that it never mattered if I was wearing something that showed more skin, or if I was wearing a winter coat zipped from just below my chin all the way down to my ankles. That area is notorious for that type of activity. I decided to be firm, and I told the person sternly, I'm not interested. I noticed there were 2 men in the van. They looked almost identical, as they may have been twins or brothers. Both men had a very, very dark complexion, dark eyes, and dark, short hair. The van didn't move. I was super annoyed and crossed the road again to get away. At this point, I figured this would be enough for them to stop following me. They didn't. They kept circling back every time I crossed the road. I've never had to put that much effort into getting a horny pervert to leave me alone, so this is when I started feeling unsafe. They zipped by me at the speed traffic was flowing in, and I yelled for them to F off. I thought it finally worked. It had been 3 minutes and I hadn't seen the van, so I thought I was in the clear. Just in case, I pulled my phone out and was getting ready to call my sister that I lived with. Just then, the van pulled up to me very quickly, and before I could even blink, one of the men jumped out of the van, opened the back door, and approached me quickly in an aggressive manner, as if he were about to scoop me up and throw me into the vehicle. The traffic in that area is very inconsistent. It was dead, and I imagine that is what they were waiting for. Just as the man was about to place his hands on me, I tilted my phone and said, "You are being filmed in my live video chat. I gave my friends your license plate number and the police have been notified." I was so scared, but I didn't let that show. I stayed as calm as I could. The man paused like he was considering if I was bluffing or telling the truth, so I tilted the phone more as to give the fake audience a better look at him. He then jumped into the van and they sped off. I have never been the same since that night. I'm afraid of walking alone now, even in the daytime. Stay safe out there. 2 creeps in the van. Let's not ever meet. I hope karma finds you both soon.
I worked at a law firm in a fairly large US city. I lived 1 block from work and therefore walked every day. About a half mile in the other direction was a restaurant I really loved. One evening, after a crappy day, I decided to go get dinner before going home. I went to the restaurant, had dinner, and started the walk home. It was dusk at this point, but there was still plenty of light. The street was deserted, except for a single car traveling in the opposite direction. The car suddenly slammed on its brakes, and I was so surprised, I stopped walking. I expected it to be someone asking for directions or something, but instead it was 2 guys just staring at me. The driver was literally hanging out the window and licking his lips. I very deliberately rolled my eyes and kept walking. I had walked most of the way back to my office when I got a weird feeling, like someone was watching me. I looked over my shoulder, and the same car was there, a couple feet behind me. They had flipped a U-turn, cut their engine, and coasted down the street behind me. The passenger was closer to me now, and he was leaning a little out of the window, making gross faces at me. I didn't think. I just started running. I heard the car start up and follow me. I was close to home, but I didn't want to lead these guys to where I live. I ran down the rest of the street and through an intersection. I made it to the parking structure for my office building, which has an entrance into the building itself, with security in the lobby. I hung out in the lobby with the security guy, and checked outside again and again until I was sure the car wasn't hanging around. Then I ran the 1 block home. I think about those guys every time I walk alone now. The events here took place when I was an 11-year-old girl on vacation with my family. My mother, younger brother, and I went down to Port Elizabeth to visit family. Being the only kids present meant we were more than excited to play in the ocean than spend time indoors. My mom picked a sunny day. We packed our boogie boards, and we headed to the nearest beach with my grandma tagging along. My brother and I ran towards a set of stairs leading down to the beach. I stopped. There were eyes on me. I sensed it. Growing up in South Africa, you are taught to be vigilant. Notice your surroundings. Notice people especially. I looked around the crowd trying to pinpoint what was setting my radar off. Then I found it. 2 men about 20 meters in front of me, about late 20s to early 30s. They were frozen in place, staring at me with big, toothy smiles on their faces. I returned a smile and a nod, acknowledging their presence but also making them aware I saw them. Be friendly, not naive. Be polite, don't trust. Observing them, I felt unsettled. The crowd was moving around them. They didn't speak to one another, and they only seemed to move as I glanced away. I was alarmed but only made a mental note to keep an eye on them, continued down the stairs and jumped into the soft sand. My brother and I waited for the adults to pick a spot to set up before we took off swimming. Some time went by. I saw the same men from earlier made it into the water quite some distance from us and felt a bit silly for still worrying about them. But I just couldn't shake that uneasiness. I got out and took a rest by my mom. I didn't see the men anywhere, but the feeling of having eyes on me stayed. I chalked it up to paranoia and went back to the water after a few minutes. My brother had gotten out of the water and started digging his magnificent sand pit, so I decided to use him as a landmark to determine my position in the water while riding the waves out. I did this a few times. Suddenly, goosebumps shot up my back. I looked around, and the same men were just a few meters away from me, waving and beckoning me towards them. I was having fun up until then, and hadn't noticed them approaching. Adrenaline set in as I saw them smiling once more. Their eyes seemed blank, insincere and out of place with those huge grins. I nervously grinned back and just shook my head at their invitation to come closer. I'm sure the fear was written all over my face, though. As if to confirm my fears of their intentions, they started towards me. I knew I wouldn't be strong enough in the water to fight, run or swim, and nobody was close enough to hear me call out. As I was panicking, the water suddenly pulled me deeper into the sea. A big wave was coming. I placed my boogie board in position and started paddling. I was now further into the ocean than the creeps. The wave hit when they were about 1 meter away. It took me right past them. I felt relieved for a split second, but then felt a hand grabbing and yanking my ankle hard. My heart caught in my throat. I kicked out of instinct. Fortunately, being sunscreen doused, I was slippery and managed to get free instantly. The wave carried me all the way to the beach. I was coughing with a mouthful of seawater, but scampered to my feet and ran to fetch my brother. I told him I'd race him back to Mom, and he was delighted for the challenge. I glanced back from where the sea had just ejected me. The creeps were still standing where they were, still smiling and waving. I stayed at my mom's side until we finally packed up to head home. As we walked to our car, I looked over my shoulder. There they were, 2 grown men, staring, smiling and waving at a child they had tried to grab like nothing was weird. Then they turned around and disappeared in the crowd. Yeah, let's not meet again, you smiley fucks.